Hi everyone. So this week it's just myself. So John and I are going to start to alternate these podcasts, basically, hopefully with a view to kind of make it more interesting for the people that are listening, and also we can obviously cover different topics, talk about different things, and bring different people on. So this week I'm going to talk about post-traumatic stress disorder, otherwise known as PTSD. So I'll just give it a few moments for people to join. If I click the comments, I can see what's going on, which is good. So I'm just going to check that we're live. Because as most of you know, John and I are so good with the tech that half the time we're talking and we're not live, and then sometimes we are live and we're still talking. So okay, so I'm appearing on Facebook. That's good. It's always good when you can see yourself on Facebook and YouTube. So welcome to this podcast. So what we're going to do today, really, I'm just going to talk about PTSD. It comes up quite a lot for lots of our clients. So again, if we look at the numbers of people that we're dealing with and the types of problems that we deal with, obviously there's a whole long list and a big range of symptoms that people present with, really, that come to us for SRT appointments. So I'm just going to say hi to Agatha. It's good to see you. Always good to see your smiley face. And I quite like your little image, actually, because it pops up on the comments and we can see the sort of smiley face, which is good. So I think it's one of those things, isn't it, when you're doing these things and you're talking to people you can't see and you don't know effectively, it's quite nice in their sort of Facebook avatar to actually see the person, so you've got some idea what they look like. So I was going to say hi to Vicky, who's joined as well. So so if I carry on, really. So I think one of the big long list of symptoms that we see from an SRT perspective, PTSD tends to be up there with anxiety, depression, intrusive thoughts, that kind of thing. So it's very common. And of course, when we look at what PTSD is, it's a named post-traumatic stress disorder. So basically, it kind of, I guess it varies for different people. Hi, Gabby. Good to see you. You'll be glad to see them on time. Or I think I was more or less on time anyway, which is good, because we don't want to be too time, by the minute, because obviously that would put us into the category of being far too organised. So more or less on time, I think, is good from my perspective, really. So yes, if we look at PTSD, so different people can be affected in different ways. I had a good friend that used to work in mental health quite some time ago, and I remember him telling me that he worked with people that had mental health problems and was helping people with mental health problems. And he said PTSD is a really interesting one. He said, you could get someone that gets bitten by a dog that then suffers the trauma of that dog bite for the rest of their life. So they're really badly affected by PTSD because they were bitten by a dog and because of the things that could have happened to them and the way they kind of experience that particular event. Whereas you could take another person that's bitten by the same dog in the same way, same place of their body, and they just shrug it off and it makes no difference. And they go on with their normal life. So these two kind of situations present differently for different people. One person was bitten by a dog and they have PTSD that they need to deal with for the rest of their life. And the other person's bitten by a dog and has no effect on them. Oh, hi, Adriana. Good to see you here. Be looking forward to seeing you in October, basically, in Ithaca, because I can see that you're joining us, which is going to be good fun. We're looking forward to it. I'm starting to see lots of people booking now, and I guess as the date gets closer, people start to look at their personal circumstances regarding these courses and whether that kind of dovetails in with their own situation. So yeah, John and I'll be looking forward to seeing any of you guys that are booked to see us in October in Ithaca, New York. So getting back to PTSD, this is the kind of topic today we're talking about. So again, different things cause PTSD. I read through accounts every day, lots of accounts from lots of people, and people that are involved in road traffic accidents, that have had or experienced different things. I guess the feeling they could have died. They didn't die in that road traffic accident, but they could have died. That tends to cause PTSD. We see lots of people that have been the victims in different ways: sexual assault, mugging, robbery, those sorts of things. Health problems obviously cause PTSD as well. So again, also for women primarily, like childbirth problems, problems with childbirth, where they think they're going to die and obviously leave the baby still living, that can cause a lot of stress and trauma. So there's lots of things that cause PTSD for different people. And I guess that's kind of why it's difficult to treat from a kind of mental health perspective, because there isn't a one rule fits all type scenario, and there's certainly not one method of dealing with and helping people that experience trauma. So the way that we see it from a kind of academy perspective and a spirit release therapy perspective, I guess, is obviously people that have very severe PTSD tend to have lots of other complications as well. So it's not just one thing. People that have PTSD will be, most of them will be probably quite anxious. They'll have anxiety problems and concerns. Some of them tend to have OCD, so lots of hand washing, so all of these conditions, if you look at it from a medical perspective, I think the way that the medical perspective kind of wrap these things up tend to be fear-based. So anxiety, PTSD, they're kind of fear-based issues and problems, I guess, and come from trauma, those sorts of things. So people that have got PTSD will generally be anxious, generally be depressed. So we again see this range of sort of negative emotions, meaning that from our perspective, we're looking at things from a spiritual angle, not a kind of physical perspective. So we're looking at the vibration level. So Chen and the guides will always talk about vibration primarily. And someone that's been through trauma is going to be in a fearful state. They're going to be anxious, depressed, probably having intrusive thoughts, that type of thing. And of course, they're basically sending out the vibration of negativity. So their own etheric vibration will be quite low. And as we know, if you've got a low etheric vibration and you're in that kind of negative sphere, you're having negative thoughts on a daily basis, hourly basis, you're kind of broadcasting that frequency of vibration. So what that means is you attract people to you with a similar vibration. So you'll find yourself surrounded by other people with similar problems, similar mental health conditions, mental health thoughts, that type of thing. And of course, what that does from our perspective is that will attract negative energies into your space. So negative entities exist in those low frequencies. They attach to people and they help to kind of create fear and general negativity. And of course, when they're attached to someone's etheric field, they'll then drive that kind of intrusive thought, negative behavior, negative thought pattern. Hi, Sarah. Great to have you here from KY, which is cool. Well, I'm not sure where KY is, particularly New York, I'm guessing. If it is KY, obviously we're coming to New York in October, which will be good. So I think from that perspective, obviously, PTSD kind of covers this big, broad spectrum of symptoms. But from our perspective, people that have PTSD will always, more or less, always have discarnate spirits attached or very close to them that are negative in that frequency. They'll always have interdimensional parasites connected. So again, we see interdimensional parasites as these kind of almost like fleas on a dog, really. They're kind of energies that are very negative, but they're quite small, but they kind of connect almost like a group together. So if you can imagine lots of fleas on a dog, and the dog kind of either doesn't know they're there or can't get them off, these interdimensional parasites tend to connect to people's etheric field and just kind of suck energy, which causes fatigue generally. So again, people with PTSD are going to be fatigued because their energy will be drained by any negative attachments. Kentucky, I was wrong actually. Sorry about that, Sarah. I assumed KY was New York, even though that's NY. So it's a bit of a faux pas on my part. So thanks for providing the answer to that one, which is cool. So again, this is where we are with these things. It's all about sort of vibration. It's all about the way things are. Anyone that has questions in the chat, you can pop your questions in there. So covering PTSD. So anyone that you know that has PTSD, or people you know that have the symptoms of PTSD, generally, again, anxiety, depression, intrusive thoughts, OCD, that type of thing. So what we would do from an SRT perspective is when we work through the protocol, we're obviously working through all of these different layers. So we're looking first for entities and then discarnate spirits attached. And then we're looking for negative energy like curses. We're looking for portals in that person's home or physical space. And we're also looking for negative portals in their etheric field. Then we're going to kind of drop down into parasites, so interdimensional parasites, those types of things. And then there's a whole list of other things that we're looking for, maybe other intrusive devices, so alien implants, those sorts of things come up. We're looking for AI constructs that are in the etheric field. And AI's got a new thing from our perspective. We haven't really seen it particularly before. I've been doing this with Terry for 10 years, and we didn't see AI at all. It never came out at all. But within the last year, lots of the certified practitioners that we have from an SRA perspective are actually identifying alien implants in people's fields and AI also. So these are, again, things that are coming up. They're quite new from that perspective, but we know how to clear them, and we know how to kind of treat them from a spiritual resolution perspective, I guess. And this is one of the things that we're quite keen to do. PTSD is pretty huge, I think, certainly. And of course, if you look at the way that PTSD affects people, it tends to stop people working. So certainly it's an extreme condition that has an extreme outcome. And that extreme outcome obviously kind of dovetails into the family. So people that have a family member that's suffering with PTSD will be affected. It affects their life, it affects the children in the household, anyone else in the household, affects their ability to go to work and earn money, pay the bills. So PTSD has this huge knock-on effect for families and for people that live together. And this is why we're very keen from a kind of SRA perspective to start to work with people. Obviously, we clear people every day that have PTSD, but we haven't really done research into PTSD as yet. And it was something that Terry was very keen to do. So Terry Palmer obviously was working the protocol, helped develop the protocol with myself and Chen over 10 years. And he was very keen to get into what PTSD is from a kind of manifestation perspective, how we can find the range of things that we can do spiritually to clear people that have PTSD. So we need to go to the heart of the problem. So we need to go back to what caused PTSD. And everyone obviously has that kind of traumatic event that happened in their life that they perceive to be traumatic, even if other people would have experienced the same thing and not been traumatic. But for them, it was traumatic. And that then created this kind of knock-on effect, effectively, and then the symptoms that we know and we see from PTSD that we're all very aware of, I guess, from that perspective. So we wanted to start to research it and find people and work with organizations. So again, we're kind of looking to connect to veterans and sort of help for heroes in the UK, sort of war-based trauma charities that have lots of people that have been to war, that have been in these life-threatening situations, or they've been exposed to war in its kind of raw form, or things that have happened to them, they've been shot, or they've been involved in explosions, that kind of thing. So they've been through very frightening experiences that the human brain isn't really designed to cope with particularly well. And of course, when they get back home, wherever that happens to be, in whatever country it happens to be, they find that they start to exhibit these odd symptoms that we now know, or we now call PTSD. I think in the old days, it was probably called shell shock, wasn't it, going back in time? Certainly veterans that came back from war used to suffer with what was termed shell shock, because they've been in these life-threatening situations, and the levels of trauma, they're not really able to assimilate into their own kind of psychology to a certain degree. So this is where we're looking from an academy perspective to start to do some research, to connect with organizations and people that have PTSD. And then obviously we can work through our protocol, clearing the negative attachments from the etheric field, clearing that negative aspect. And obviously what we do doesn't go to the heart of the trauma. We're not going to the heart of that place, or that event that created that experience for that person. But what SRT does do, of course, is remove all of the negative experiences and attachments around the etheric. So it leaves that person still having to process the event that happened to them, the trauma that happened to them, but without all of the other invasive negative manipulation that happens from all of these other things that we talked about. I'm just going to read a few questions. Cynthia saying, I've been a victim of PTSD, social anxiety, mental depression, but with the help of Myso Eden on Telegram, I've been able to overcome them with the healing of psilocybin mushrooms. Yeah, this is the thing. I mean, there's lots of things that can help people. I think this is the key thing, Cynthia, really. There isn't a one kind of pill fixes everything, and there is no magic, really, whether we're looking at kind of the medical aspects of things or the spiritual aspects. There isn't one thing that fixes all problems, and different people react in different ways. So it is a case that it's good to try different things. It's good to try different therapies and work with different people. Obviously, from our perspective, we're viewing everything from an etheric frequency-based perspective. And when we can see their negative energies in your frequency, removing them is the first step, really, to a healing journey, in my personal opinion. And I think that spiritual sovereignty is that first step. When we've cleared and removed all of the negativity that's connected to you, you're then able to start to process things in the raw format from your own psychological perspective. And of course, working with other things like mushrooms and cannabis, there's a whole list of things that people can talk about that can help them to calm their mental state down. Obviously, from my personal experience, meditation is good, because meditation teaches you to get control of your thought process and starts to block out any of that intrusive negative thoughts that we all have on a daily basis. And for me, this is the key thing, really. And I've spent a long time learning to meditate and obviously working with Chen, my guide, to get to a point that the thoughts that come in generally are positive thoughts. And when negative thoughts come in or intrusive thoughts come in, they're pushed out immediately because they're observed to be what they are. They're not my personal thoughts. They're coming in from an external perspective. And of course, we know that this is telepathy. So we all know, or we kind of understand from a spiritual perspective, that we're telepathic. Humans are telepathic by default. And that telepathy tends to get turned off over the course of our life. And of course, we can turn it back on again by following spiritual practices like meditation, group meditations, working with teachers, that type of thing. And then we can start to talk to our guides. It opens us up to this whole new world that exists, that we know it's there because it's a spiritual world that we can't see, but we can communicate and talk to it. And we also know that there are many seers over the years that have had access to information that's come from spirit. So most people, apart from the scientific communities, of course, that are trying to prove spirit exists, which at the moment they haven't been able to do, but at some point they probably will. But when we can get to that point, then we'll obviously start to change the way that we think and the way we deal with things. And this is where things like PTSD should be easier to work with, because from our perspective, we think that if we can work with groups of soldiers, groups of people that have come back from war, we can clear them and bring them back into a spiritually sovereign state, and then we can start to push them into some type of other therapies that talk about the events that they went through, the experiences they've had. Hypnosis is obviously a good way of doing that. Past life regression is a good way. So we could take them through meditations that take them back to the point that happened and get them to accept what happened to them and then kind of bring them forward. So I mean, I've seen some of these things work quite well for people that have PTSD. So the whole range of spiritual tools, I guess, that we have available to us when someone's clear. But if they're not clear and they're not sovereign, then it's very difficult to engage with any type of healing, in my opinion, really, because you're always working with a person that has something on their shoulder that's talking to them that's generally negative and kind of causing that negative thought process, that negative intrusive aspect. So I'm going to read through. I think Jackie's put a thing in the comments. Do you ever see it from past life issues? I have PTSD. It's gotten a lot better. They're working on it. I still get triggered when I get backstabbed or betrayed. And I have many past lives with betrayal. Interesting, Jackie. I think it's probably true for most people, I guess, really. Again, we all kind of know that we've all had lots of past lives, and we can go into past life regression and go back to past lives. And that's one of the things that we teach on some of the spiritual protection courses that both myself and Johnny run. We do past life regressions where we use the intention to go back to a recent past life that's causing a problem that you have today. So let's go back to a point in time when something happened to you in a past life, but that event is very predominant in your life, this life. So obviously in your case, betrayal is a big thing. And I guess that means trust is probably a huge thing for you as well, trying to learn to trust people. And of course, as humans, we're not great. Most people don't have a huge amount of integrity. Most people tell lies. Most people like the concept of having integrity and trustworthiness and the positive attributes, but we see it all the time, and we see it with people that in our families, our children, wives, husbands, parents. People do lie to each other generally most of the time, and this, of course, will be one of the things that will come online as we become more intuitive and we become more telepathic. Things like telling untruths, telling lies won't be able to happen. So politicians won't be able to stand on stage and tell a lie, because people will know intuitively that what they've just said is actually not right, because the frequency of the words will be negative, and we'll know that. So intuitive people already know when someone's looking you in the eye and they're lying to you, we see the signs, we read the signs, we feel intuitively what they're saying isn't true. So I think this is the thing. So from that PTSD perspective, obviously past life trauma will and can be carried forward into this life. So Nata's just saying she's had 2 PTSD issues, phobia of knives and being screamed, shouted at, managed to heal both issues. Oh, so you've done quite well then, Agatha, really, to work through those. I think this is the thing, isn't it? We're all on this life journey, and we're all on this journey kind of together in this life, really. So we all have to work through things that happen to us. We all wake up every morning, we all drive our cars, and we all do things, and that causes sometimes traumatic events, or we have problems with people. We go through divorce, we go through betrayals. There's all sorts of negative things that we're all experiencing on a kind of daily basis, really. And it's learning to adapt to those events. And primarily, I think, for me, certainly, it was learning the kind of like the key change in my personal life was when I kind of realized that I couldn't change other people. I could just change the way that I react to situations. And I think when you kind of get to that thought process, you sit back and think, okay, I can get mad and I can get angry, and I can be that person, or I can just sit back and assimilate the things that are happening, and then look at how I basically react and how I behave to those things. And when we start to realize that it's our choice, basically, in terms of our reaction, and the way that we react then changes us. If we react in a very negative way to something, if someone's in a car and they cut across you and you become road raged and you become angry and you start shouting at them, and that whole thing changes your emotional state, changes your vibration very negatively, and then the rest of your day generally is spoilt because you've allowed yourself to move into that very low, angry, negative vibration. Whereas if someone pulls in front of you in a car and you put your hand up and say, yeah, no problem, it's okay. You made a mistake. I acknowledge that your driving is not particularly good and you made an error of judgment, and I accept that for what it was, that perhaps you're not the best driver in the world. Then I sit back, listen to my music and carry on in my high vibrating positive state. So it's down to your reaction to the events that happen in your life as to how it's going to change you. And this is the thing, you can't change other people. We all kind of try to control our children when we have children, because generally children need to be controlled to a certain degree, and we teach them lessons, and they're obviously watching what we do and how we do things. So if you're a parent, you kind of have that concept that you have another individual, another human being in your purview that you can control and change. But effectively, adult to adult, you can't change other people. You can only change your reaction to events as they come up. And the same with PTSD, really. If events happen in your life that are traumatic, depending upon how you assimilate them into your own psychology, depends upon how they affect you longer term. And I guess this is probably one of the things that if we look at soldiers, for instance, going to war, if they've had a lot of kind of counselling before they go to war, and are explained to them that they're going to see some terrible imagery, they're going to see their friends, die in different traumatic ways, they're going to be the most fearful they've ever been in their life. If they were actually set up to understand all of those things before they go, and then when they come back, they're sat down and they go through some sort of one-to-one therapy conversation about the fact they've survived being sent to war, they've come back, some of their friends didn't, feelings of guilt. There's lots of feelings and emotions that they'll need to process that they probably don't get a chance to, because it's generally not the way that we do things. And then obviously from our perspective, if we look at soldiers that come back from very negative environments where people are dying and people are in pain, people are screaming and people are passing in traumatic ways, that's going to be a feeding ground for negative entities and a feeding ground for negative discarnate spirit as well. So those places, those war battlegrounds, are going to be covered with spiritual entities that are negative, and those entities are going to attach to those soldiers and come back with them. We've done some clearings recently for a particular soldier that's been to some type of war zone, I believe, and he had a lot of curses. Every week we cleared him weekly, and he had a lot of curses week by week. So it's quite obvious that the actual locals and the natives in these countries are sending curses, and they were quite strong curses that were being sent to the actual physical soldiers that are walking around. And that's something that I haven't really appreciated and didn't really expect to see. I haven't seen it particularly before, but I've started to notice some of these things that when we send effectively our children, women are mothers are sending their children, to war, boys and girls, obviously, and they're being cursed by the people that live in these other places, and then coming back with entities, attachments, curses, the whole thing. It's no wonder they're in such a negative place when they come back, and of course they bring that negativity back into their families, and the families don't know how to kind of work with them, how to live with people that are going through and trying to explore the emotions that they've had to be, they've experienced and they've had to adapt to from those scenarios, basically. So I just want to read Vicky saying, can entity attachments also cause physical problems like back pain? So it's a really good question, Vicky. So yeah, I mean, basically entity attachments can cause physical problems, because if we think about what's happening, if you've got an etheric field that's your vibration, it's a blueprint of your body. So if you can imagine another version of you that's slightly outside of the physical one that we can see, that vibrates in a different frequency, that has a complete mirrored blueprint of your physicality. So you've got your head, your arms, all that kind of thing. So basically, if entities attach to you, say an entity attaches to the back of your neck, they're going to connect an energetic cord into the back of your etheric field at the back of your neck. And they're going to basically, they're then able to kind of assimilate your energy. So they can suck energy from you etherically that way, which is generally how they kind of exist. So let's say hi to Nicole. Good to see you on here, Nicole. So that's kind of what they do. They'll attach to your etheric field and they'll basically pull energy from you. And of course, that can cause pain. And I've seen and I've experienced, obviously doing this work, we get to experience all sorts of things which most people tend not to, I guess, generally, which is why I kind of ended up doing this. But one of the things I had, the opportunity, I guess, to experience is lots of psychic attacks over the years. Certainly working with clients. If you're working with clients and we're clearing curses and entities and things, you get attacked generally as a practitioner. So it's one of the things that kind of goes with the job to a certain degree. So we learn to deal with that. And it's one of the things that we teach the SRA practitioners, is how to deal with psychic attacks. But one of those things is actual physical pain. So quite often, one of the most common psychic attacks I've received, or I've had over the years, really, so 20 years, I guess, is what feels like someone's put a pin in your eye. So it's like a sharp pain right in the middle of your eye, to the point that it almost kind of gets you to scream. It's so painful. And then when I look psychically at my etheric field, I actually see something stuck out of my eye. So basically, an entity has come into the space and effectively has inserted something into the etheric field, right into my eye. And I feel the physical pain of that, almost like a burning pain. And I've had it a lot. And then, of course, etherically, I then remove that, speak to Chen, say, Chen, something's just basically inserted something into my eye. He's like, yep, okay, cleared and removed. And then probably within 10 minutes, pain's gone. There's no pain, and there's no pain ever again. So it's like an attack that kind of doesn't really do much apart from annoy you, but it is quite painful. So that is one of the things. Quite often, again, we see lots of cords and connections. It's a bit like the Matrix film. If you guys have seen the Matrix, you see Neo being unhooked from the Matrix, and he has those big kind of round connections that go into the back of his spine, all the way down his spine, basically into his chakra points. There's like a connection that gets pulled out when he kind of unhooks from the Matrix. And those connections are used to basically assimilate his energy, to control his energy. And I guess in the Matrix concept, they're basically pulling, his etheric essence into the machine, if you like, in whatever way. And we see the same thing. So I see, basically, from an etheric perspective, these chakra points on the back, these are where entities connect into, and they cause pain. And quite often, people have upset stomachs, is another thing. So occasionally with psychic attacks, you end up, spending half a day on the toilet, basically, because things are just kind of going in one end, coming out the other very quickly. So even though that could be sort of seen to be anxiety or anxiety-based problems, quite often entity attachments cause those sorts of things. So yeah, Vicky, to answer the question in a kind of bullet point summary is yes, basically entity attachments do cause physical pain for sure. Okay, so I'm just going to go to Sarah. So Sarah's talking about profound experience with SRT. I had an ailment for over a year, which had pain daily. After my first clearing, poof, gone. I was amazed. And this is the thing, actually. Obviously, lots of people suffering with pain in different places that the doctors can't find, the medical profession can't find, because it's not a physical problem, it's a spiritual problem. And this is where we need to kind of get to a point, I think, as a society, that we actually understand that spirit is spirit, it's real, spiritual problems are real, and spiritual problems cause physical problems as well. And again, if we look at people that have amputations, so people that have had their legs amputated, soldiers, again, coming back to them, soldiers at war that have been stepped on a landmine or been involved in some sort of traumatic explosion, that have lost a limb, they'll tell you they can still feel the limb. So they still scratch the part that's missing. So if they lost their foot, knee down, quite often they get pain in their feet, pain in their ankles, pain in that lower limb. So even though the physical part has gone, it doesn't really explain why they would be scratching a part of their body that they don't now have. But of course, they still have the etheric part. So the blueprint mirror copy of your physical body, which is the etheric, is still there. So even though the physical part's missing, and obviously the nerve endings have been tied off, and that part's been obviously cleaned and amputated, from a physical perspective, from a spiritual perspective, that soldier still has a foot, he still has a lower knee, still has a part of his leg. So that part is the part that effectively has probably incurred this huge trauma when that part was blown off in that accident. And that's the part that's not being resolved or looked at from a spiritual perspective. So if we were to look at it from a kind of SRT perspective, we would probably see, an etheric field that's been blown apart. There'll probably be fragments and things inside the etheric, actually at the leg, in the knee, in the ankle, in the sort of lower leg. So that bit would need probably to be cleared and cleaned spiritually, in the same way that we would clean and clear the physical leg effectively. The spiritual part needs the same thing doing, because the spiritual part is likely to have attachments and other things in it. So it kind of stands to reason, really, that or for us, it's pretty obvious why people have the problems they do. It's just a case of trying to get the knowledge and information out to the kind of general public that things like PTSD can be treated, and they need to be treated spiritually as well as mentally. So we would never say that the spiritual intervention is the only intervention. Medicine has its place, of course, but also so does the spiritual aspect. And the spiritual aspect is currently the part from PTSD perspective that's missing. And we need to bring in our interventions to actually bring that online, I think. And if we can amalgamate the two things, if we can work with people that have PTSD from a spiritual perspective, along with the medical aspect, then I think people would see a huge amount of positivity and difference in the way that they heal the traumas that they've been through. Okay, so if anyone's got any other questions, I was going to basically bring that to an end. So hopefully we've been through PTSD from the SRA perspective, really. So we obviously use spirit release therapy as the mechanism to clear people, and people that have traumas and PTSD will definitely have negative attachments in their field that need to be cleared and removed. And when we bring them back to a sovereign state, we remove all of that negativity. It then opens them up to start having hypnosis and other types of healing modalities that can get to the root of the traumas and actually bring that person back to a healed state. Because ultimately, that's kind of where we need to go. We need to bring the psychology back to a healed state. But to do that, we need to have a clean, clear mental structure, really, that we can then use these interventions to kind of map forward. Okay, well, I'll say thanks very much for joining, guys. It's been great to see you all. John has just joined at the end, of course. Well, it'll be interesting to see what you think, John. And obviously, this was my kind of perspective, really, on PTSD. But yeah, we'll go through it at some point and have a chat. And I think this is one of the things that's quite good. Both John and I are going to start to do these podcasts individually and still together. And obviously, we're going to bring on some certified practitioners to talk about their experiences. Because ultimately, obviously, we've got a course coming up in October in New York. So we've basically booked our flights, got our passports. We're starting to get our things together. We've got Esther sorting out. So we're kind of excited now, looking forward to meeting the next group of kind of practitioners that we're going to take through that 5-day course. So it's kind of going to be super exciting, really good fun. We're looking forward to it. And we're just sorting things out that we need in the States. Because obviously, from our perspective, everything we've done so far has been in the UK. So we're now kind of taking SRA, or the SRA Roadshow abroad. And obviously New York, America's got to be the first place to go, really. So we're looking forward to meeting you guys over there, and we're going to have a super week together. And obviously we'll go through the training, etc. So we'll say goodbye, and we'll catch you again soon. Bye, folks. Thanks for joining.